Hello, and welcome to the Reinbeck United Methodist Church Safe Sanctuary Training Program. I'm Pastor Terry Plucker, and I will host you through the remainder of this presentation. You might be asking, why are we here? Well, do you really love kids? If you love them, you'll do whatever you need to do in order to protect them. Have you read the news lately? Why is the Roman Catholic Church in trouble? Because they didn't take youth protection seriously. And finally, we can't afford not to do this because even one false claim could destroy any one of us, our families, and our church. From what are we protecting our church? Obviously, we want to protect our church from lawsuit, from the trauma of accusations, from the loss of reputation and respect in the community. From what are we protecting ourselves? Obviously, we want to protect ourselves from false accusation and lawsuit, from not knowing how to respond if something does happen, and from temptation. From what are we protecting our youth? Obviously, we want to protect them from accident, injury, and abuse. Let's look at each of those more closely. First, accidents. What kinds of accidents should we be concerned about in the ministry for which you are being trained? Second, injuries. What are some activities that might increase the opportunity for injury? And what could we do to minimize that risk? Although it is not required for Safe Sanctuary certification, first aid and CPR training are certainly to our advantage. If you have certifications in these areas, please indicate that on your application form. Finally, abuse. The reason we have to be concerned about abuse is that there are 83,000 incidents of abuse reported every year. That comes down to 227 per day, 9 per hour, 1 every 6 minutes. How many children are involved in those incidents? A shocking 100,000 children are involved in these cases of reported abuse every year. Sadly enough, many cases of abuse go unreported. How many incidences of abuse are not reported per year? Experts estimate that 160,000 are not reported. What fraction of girls will be sexually abused before they're 18? 1 out of every 4. And the same question for boys? 1 out of every 6. Finally, abuse. What are the types of abuse? First, there's physical abuse, deliberately causing bodily harm to a person. Violent battery, burning, choking, fracturing bones, and other intentional injuries. This also includes tickling in many cases. Emotional abuse, spoken or unspoken violence, sending the message that they are worthless, bad, unloved, and undeserving of love and care. It includes many cases of domestic violence. Neglect. This is abuse in which a person endangers a youth's health, welfare, and safety through negligence. It may be withholding food, medical care, or affection. It also includes failure to provide reasonable supervision, which is one place that churches have sometimes had an issue. Ritual abuse can be any of the other types of abuse inflicted on a youth, intentionally and in a stylized way. Commonly, it is perpetuated in the name of a higher power or authority. Hazing is a form of ritual abuse. And sexual abuse. Sexual contact between a youth and an adult or a more powerful youth. Remember that a youth is never capable of giving consent. It can also be partially or totally verbal. One of the keys to identifying whether this is an abusive relationship or not is looking for a power differential, where one person is older, bigger, stronger, or carries more authority. For instance, a leader in a church program. In an effort to address this, we have created the Safe Sanctuary policy for the Reinbeck United Methodist Church. That policy provides for screening and training for all paid staff, people who have regular contact with children and youth, anyone who's an overnight chaperone, and as many adults as possible to make the program run smoothly and safely. You'll be asked to complete an application. You'll be asked to sign so that we can complete a criminal background check. And you'll have an opportunity to review the policy through the duration of this program. The Safe Sanctuary policy forbids certain kinds of behavior. It forbids inappropriate touch, talk, and images. It also forbids any illegal activity, dangerous activity, and immoral activity. There may be other kinds of activity that aren't on this list that would be covered under the Safe Sanctuary policy. Can you think of any others? So let's talk about inappropriate contact. What kinds of touch are inappropriate? You might first think of any contact with parts of the body that are covered by the swimsuit. You might also think about kissing or fondling. You might think about putting your arm around a person. All of those could be inappropriate. We also might have to include hugs under certain circumstances, holding hands under certain circumstances, and any kind of touch that makes the other person feel uncomfortable. What kinds of touch are okay? Certainly, holding hands in group activities, touching a person on the shoulder nearest you in order to get their attention or to show affection, holding hands in prayer, shaking hands, high fives, fist bumps. There are any number of physical contacts that are appropriate under most circumstances. Let's not forget other kinds of contact. Don't forget contact through Facebook and Twitter, email, and texting. These kinds of contact can deteriorate into inappropriate contact very quickly. A good rule of thumb is if it isn't yours, don't touch it. A good rule of thumb is also you can offer, but don't initiate. In other words, it's okay to ask someone, do you need a hug right now? But don't just presume to hug them without asking. Two-deep leadership is another requirement of the Safe Sanctuary policy. What is it? It means that at least 2 adults must be present at any event. At least one of those adults must be Safe Sanctuary trained. How many adults are allowed at an event? As many as it takes in order to be safe. In classrooms, we have to require 2 deep leadership. And we also suggest keeping an open door or window so that others can see what you're doing. What if a youth or a child needs individual attention, like mentoring or a personal problem? We certainly do not want to prevent that. Give them the attention they need, but be safe and smart about it. For instance, do it in public places, with other people around, where other people can see exactly what's happening and no suspicion can be aroused. Here are some rules for being safe and smart. Get permission from parents. Always make sure the parents know where they are and what they're doing. Be in a public place. Never go to your home. You may visit the student's home if their parents are there and give you permission. Finish before 9 p.m. Always ask, what would I think if I were the suspicious type? It's sad that we have to ask ourselves that question, but there are many people who will make assumptions about what is happening based upon even a lack of evidence. During overnight events, how many adults need to be trained for an overnight event? For normal events, 1 trained adult is enough. For overnight events, we require all adults to be trained. What's the safest sleeping arrangement for overnight events? You might think that we want at least 1 adult in each room of youth. That, however, becomes impractical with 2 deep leadership. It is very important under those circumstances that there be 2 adults in a room. If we were to do that, we'd have to have a 1-to-1 ratio in a hotel room. So, the common policy is that the safest sleeping arrangement for both youth and adults is youth and adults in separate rooms. Adults can still manage and monitor what's happening in the other rooms very easily. Are there any exceptions to that rule? Yes, families may sleep together. What about campgrounds and other dormitory type situations where all the youth and adults might be housed in one large room? Common sense must be used. Permission slips will inform parents of the arrangements, and adults should make sure they are never alone with one youth in the sleeping area. Moving on to permission slips. When do we need them? First, we need a permission slip if we're going somewhere. Second, we need one for high-risk activities. Or for overnight activities. If a youth forgets, can we take a permission slip over the phone? No, we cannot. Can you imagine explaining to the emergency room doctor, really, they did give us permission, but you'll have to take my word for it. That's just not good policy. Considering transportation. Driver's licenses and insurance cards must be on file in the office before you're allowed to transport any children or youth. With regard to 2 deep leadership in vehicles, do we need to have 2 adults in every vehicle? No. As long as we have the required number of adults along on the trip, it may be necessary to have adults in separate cars. In that case, more than 1 youth should be in each car. Try to never find yourself in a situation where it's just you and 1 youth. Some common sense rules about transportation: seatbelts are required 100% of the time, no reaction impairing substances, no smoking, and follow all traffic laws, including those speed limit signs. Now, what if something does happen? In spite of all of our best efforts, something does happen and we need to act. The first thing we do is protect the victim. Second, remove the accused. Third, notify a pastor and follow their directions. To review that, first we want to protect the victim. Make sure that they are no longer in danger, make sure they are comforted, and make sure they have any assistance or first aid they might need. Second, we want to remove the accused so that no further damage is done. Sometimes the accused will be asked to go sit in an office and wait until a pastor comes to talk to them. Unfortunately, that's sometimes the only way to manage these kinds of situations. Finally, once you've protected the victim and separated the accused, call a pastor or talk to the person who's in charge. You'll be asked to fill out a report that simply puts in writing what you saw and heard. It is not our job to make any kind of judgment. It's not our job to talk to anyone about the incident, especially the media. The pastor is the appointed media contact person. That completes the review of the Safe Sanctuary policy. Of course, you can read the whole policy, which you should have in your hands in front of you. Now, for some examples. How well do you understand the policy? What would you do? We're at camp. A youth of the opposite sex is very upset and comes to your cabin door. No one else is home. They want to talk to you. What would you do? Some of the possibilities would be to sit near others on a picnic table outside, to say, let's talk while we walk, and then walk toward other people. To find a place where you can speak privately but still be seen by others. This is one of those situations where we must be smart about how we accomplish the work that we're about. Here's another one. The group is on a day trip hiking in a nearby park. While you're hiking, you happen to see a male adult sitting with a middle school girl. They're sitting in a quiet, off-the-beaten-path meadow, knee to knee. They're talking and laughing. Possibilities include going to sit near them, going to sit with them. And when the incident is over, please say something to the adult. Something like, I hope I didn't intrude, but I knew you needed another adult for Safe Sanctuary. Here's another one. While returning home from a trip in a 15-passenger van, another adult is driving. You could sit anywhere you want. Where do you sit and why? Your first instinct might be to sit in the front seat next to the driver, but it's an awful long ways from the front to the back of a 15-passenger van. Ideally, the second adult might sit either in the back or in the middle, preferably in their own seat. At any rate, you can see what's happening more effectively from that location. Here's another one. You're scheduled to drive for the hayrack ride. You've been fighting a sinus infection and the medicine makes you feel really spaced out. What would you do? You could call a substitute. You could call the leader and explain. The important thing is, don't drive. We almost always have a backup plan. Here's another one. You and your partner are scheduled for nurser duty. Your partner falls deathly ill and notifies you that they will not be there. What would you need to do before the event? Assuming you are Safe Sanctuary trained, which you will be after we complete this process, you would need to get a second person to be with you. They don't need to be trained, though, even though that would be great. Here's another scenario. A youth you have been mentoring shows up at your door one night. It's late at night, your spouse is out of town on business, and you're home alone. He or she just has to talk. They say they can't go home. What would you do? First, you should call the parents to let them know that their youth is safe. Second, you should go to a public place to talk. If there is no public place available, you can call a friend or the pastor to join you for the conversation. It's very important that, especially at night, you not be alone with a youth in a vulnerable situation. Try this one. A child comes to you upset. He can hardly tell you what's wrong. Finally, he tells you that an adult in the bathroom exposed himself to the youth. What would you do? Following the policy, you would protect the victim, remove the accused, call the pastor, and fill out the paperwork. Here's another one. You are awakened in the middle of the night by a noise in the hall at a hotel in which you're staying with a group of youth. Upon exploring, you discover there are girls in the boys' room. They don't seem to be doing anything wrong. What would you do? If this is the first time you've had a problem like this, you might treat it informally and say, "You know better, get back to your rooms before I have to call your parents." If this has been a persistent problem, you may have to call the parents. You might want to sit in the hall for a while to monitor what's happening and make sure that everyone stays where they're supposed to be. What would you do? You've been one of the adult volunteers at an after-school event. There's one child of the opposite gender whose parents are late. The only other adult left in the building says, "It looks like you can handle this. I'll see you on Sunday." They head out the door. What would you do? First choice would be to say, "Wait, I think we're the last ones here and we need to follow Safe Sanctuary. Would you wait with us?" On the other hand, if they sneak out without you knowing it, the best thing you can do is stay in a public area where everyone can see you, preferably outside in the open or in the entryway. While you're driving home from a concert with several youth in the car, one youth is just wild. He refuses to wear his seatbelt, throws things, won't listen to you, and is distracting you from driving. You know the picture. What would you do? I think the first thing to do would be to pull over, to stop, maybe move passengers around so the youth is not by the friends that might be causing him to act that way. If you have to, you call home and have them come get your child. It's unpleasant, but it probably won't happen again. A youth with whom you are Facebook friends posts some very racy swimsuit photos of themselves on their Facebook page. You stumble across them. What would you do? Well, you could ignore the pictures entirely, but that still leaves the youth at risk. Notifying the parents might be a good option in this case. Or if you have a good relationship with the youth, you could have a talk with them, asking if that's really the way they want themselves portrayed to the rest of the world on their Facebook page. It might be smart to unfriend them so that you're not exposed to those pictures again. It's very important that you not save the pictures to your hard drive as evidence to give to their parents. You do not want those pictures saved on your computer. That completes the Safe Sanctuary training portion of the program. Now it's time to complete your application and your criminal background check form. When you have those completed, you need to visit with the pastor in order to complete the process. Thank you very much for participating in the Reinbeck Safe Sanctuary's training program. Your concern for the safety of our children and youth is a very precious asset to us. Your willingness to provide leadership and supervision for our children and youth is invaluable. God bless you in your ministry.